Again, I'm Karen Brown, President and CEO of the Lebanon Valley Chamber of Commerce, where you are right now. Thank you so much for coming out today. We put together a year-long series of small business programs with our partnership with the Small Business Administration, SBA, the Small Business Development Center, Kutztown, the SBDC, and with SCORE. And I'm going to turn it over to Jerry in a second to talk about SCORE. But keep an eye on our calendar. This is open to the public. These are programs that we want to make sure we are giving our entrepreneurs and businesses in the community, regardless of membership with the chamber. So feel free to spread the word on them. The more people we can get out to them, the more we can provide. If there are any topics at all that you would like to see us do in the future, please feel free to share that with us so that we can collaborate and get those presenters in to get the information to you. All right. So, as I mentioned, one of our partners in putting this series together is SCORE. And I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Glenn, who is a certified SCORE mentor, and he'll tell you a little bit about what SCORE is.
Oh, thanks, Karen. Good morning again. I don't know how many of you ever heard of SCORE. Okay, so maybe I don't have to tell you at all about SCORE. SCORE is an organization who helps entrepreneurs, starting businesses, or those who are in business to improve their business. Okay, we have been in business here in the Lancaster-Lebanon area for over 50 years. We have 80 volunteers right now who help small businesses throughout both Lancaster and Lebanon counties. And if you ever need to talk to somebody about your business, give us a call. We go online, www.score.org, and you fill out a form there, and we'll assign a mentor to you. It's all confidential, and we'd love to help you if you need the help. Okay. So our guest speaker today is also a certified SCORE mentor, 𝗂𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗑𝗓. She's been 40 years in the HR business. I got some cheat sheet here, so I don't miss anything. And she spent her career in HR resource management and leadership development. He coaches and guides organizational leaders in performance improvement, leadership effectiveness, talent acquisition, onboarding, and training. She's an adjunct professor at 2 colleges here in their undergraduate and graduate work. She's it's a summer off, so she starts again next month. She has her BA in performance management and organizational dynamics. Now, who can say that again? That's I mean, I had to practice that one. And she has her master's in organizational leadership. So we have someone here who is a true expert, and we're delighted that you're here, Kathy.
Thank you, Jerry.
Great. Good morning. Morning. Come on, you can do better. Good morning. Good morning. Aren't you excited to be here? It's a wonderful topic, isn't it? So let me start out by asking you, how is the labor market treating you these days? Are they lining up at the door, the proverbial door? Are you getting stacks of resumes, lots of great candidates?
Lots of candidates, but not great.
Candidates, yes. Okay. All right. I'm just checking to make sure we're all in the right section here. Yeah, it's a little tough out there, isn't it? And COVID kind of changed things, didn't it? And you're going to hear a lot, or probably read a lot, or see a lot of media discussion about the labor shortage. And there certainly are shortages in certain jobs. But I believe there are people out there. Talent is out there. We have to work much harder now to find them. And not only find them, onboard them and keep them. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Is that what you're all finding? So the question, I always like to start out with a question, why should anyone work for you, is really somewhat rhetorical. But I want you to think about that as we go through, some basics around recruiting this morning. And let me put a plug in for a follow-on session in October where we dive a little deeper into the retention aspect of this process. Why should anyone work for you? So think about that. Now, what I want to know, since you shared, thank you for sharing a little bit about your backgrounds and the companies that you're working for the businesses that you own. Let me just check in. Do you consider yourself a guru when you're hiring, recruiting? You've got it. Feel like you're pretty expert? If you do, then maybe you'll help me facilitate this one. But I'm suspecting that maybe you're here, kind of in the middle somewhere, you know, a little bit, but maybe not a lot. Fair to middling, maybe muddling, or you don't really know. Haven't a clue. Help me, please. So that's why I'm here. I hope that I can help you with a few key pointers around this recruiting process, because it's become really almost problematic for many employers. And in a small business where your resources are very limited, it obviously becomes even tougher. And recruiting takes time. It has a cost associated with it. And if anybody's hired the wrong person, that ever happened? Time to time, maybe.
Keep going.
That costs too, doesn't it? And so it becomes really incumbent that we find the right people, hopefully the first time. And so I want to leave you today, you know, in the short time that we have together, with some ideas and some pointers on how maybe we can do this a little more finessed, with a little more skill, and perhaps get those really outstanding people in your business and the roles that you need them in. So here's some things to think about. People are your greatest asset. You've heard that before, right? Maybe you've even said it. But what does that really mean? When you say people are our greatest asset, what's that really mean? I was traveling years ago behind a tractor trailer on Route 81 to rural Virginia. And on the back of that truck, in big bold letters, it said, "People are our greatest asset." I'm like, I wanted to honk the horn and have the driver pull over and say, "What is it that you do? How come you're this company's greatest asset?" And I suspect he'd be like, "Lady, you're nuts." But can people copy what your business does? They can copy that, right? The model that you use, the things that you do, the customers that you have, can they poach those, steal those sometimes? Yeah, they can do all of that. But can they copy the people in your organization, the special and unique talent that you've drawn in? Maybe not. So people become an asset because of the unique skills and talents they bring. And so they give your organization a competitive advantage. It is hard to copy talent. Other things, yeah, they're going to find out a way to replicate. But people, not as easy to copy that. So, therefore, you'll see that cliche, if you will, out in the business world. People are our greatest asset. Because companies believe that when they have the right people and they're doing the right kind of work for your business. They are also your biggest cost, right? Does anybody have more than a couple employees on the payroll? Yeah, you know, on that top line of your P&L, payroll is going to be right up there. So they become not only hopefully your best asset, but they're your biggest expense. So you want that payoff to be really, really great. Has this happened? Anybody actively interviewing right now? So some people actively recruiting. Sometimes the person you interview isn't the one that shows up for the job, right? Oh, it's the same person. They might even have on the same clothes they had on in the interview, but they don't work out like they said they would in the interview. What happened there? How did I end up with this person? And now I gotta work the probationary period, or I gotta think about termination. And then finally, interviewing is your weakest tool for hiring. So what are we all doing here? Everybody interviews. It's at your disposal. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Large corporations do assessments and skill tests and all sorts of other things to determine if a person is a good fit. You don't have those kind of resources very likely. So you have to get really, really good at interviewing because that's what you have. That's the tool that you have. You got to work it to the max. You got to know how to do it really well. And this is true of the most unskilled position. You wouldn't hire if you didn't need that person, to perhaps a partner in your business or an executive or a senior leader or a frontline supervisor. You want to do that interview really, really well because you don't want to be doing Groundhog Day and hiring over and over because you're not finding the right people. So hopefully that makes sense. Because that's the premise I'm working from. I want to give you additional tools. You're already probably doing interviews, but are you doing them in the right way, in the most effective way? So let's talk a little bit about that. So what is on today's agenda? So there are steps that you need to take prior to hiring. So some very specific, there is a process, and perhaps some of you have a hiring process in play, but I'm going to revisit some of those things quickly. How are you sourcing people? We'll talk a little bit about beyond traditional ads, if you will. And maybe some of you are doing some things that are pretty creative that you can share if you've had good experience. And then has anybody here used behavioral-based interviewing? Does that term ring a bell? No? Okay. We could spend a day on just behavioral-based interviewing. I promise, not going to do that here. But I'm going to give you some quick tips on how you can incorporate that in your interviewing strategy and really get to know your candidates and what they may bring to your organization. And then finally, we have to remain legally compliant. Now, I'll share here that I'm somewhat of a legal nerd. In one of my previous roles, I was an employment law specialist. I spent a lot of time reading case law. You know, that doesn't say much about me, does it? My social life. But I learned a lot doing that. And I also learned reading the case law where companies often innocently misstepped. They didn't know what they didn't know. They did things during an interview process that were really inappropriate or even unlawful and didn't even know it. So it wasn't done out of malice, it was just out of a lack of knowledge. So I'm going to hit that quick at the end. So a couple things from a housekeeping standpoint. I hope our online people, Karen, can hear me okay?
I have had no comments yet.
Okay, I know, yeah, I have to use my outside voice.
Well, there's a microphone right above you.
Okay.
In this.
Okay, good, thank you.
Oh, there's a.
And
She
then,
said, they say yes online, they can hear you.
thank you for the feedback. Appreciate that. Because we're on a short timeline, what I'd like to do, unless there's something absolutely bursting your hair into flames, I'd like, we get about halfway or almost all the way through, we get to the legal stuff, in fact. I'd like to pause there and just, hold your questions for then, and we'll field some questions at that point. If it looks like I'm gonna just slide right through and go into the legal, and I don't pause for the questions, I need you to time me out. I do it all the time. I get on a roll with this stuff because it's, what I do. And I forget, and I see people looking at me like, you forgot the questions, Catherine. So don't feel free to remind me if I do that. And then at the end, hopefully we'll also have enough time. And I'll share my contact information too, if there's anything I can be helpful with as we get through. I understand, we'll go an hour to 90 minutes. If you need a bio break, just be comfortable. And if you need to take a phone call, I understand that as well. We got stuff going on, don't we?
And for those people online, we will provide a copy of the presentation after the meeting and a link to the recording.
Great, thank you, Karen. Okay, so where do we start this fun process? What's one of the first things that you need to do? even before you actually advertise for a position, start searching. One of the first things, you can peek in the handout if you need a hint.
Job description?
Yeah. You have them. So if your business is larger, you may have them. Nick, are you a one-person shop?
Me, my dad, and two other people.
Okay,
So it's family run.
family run, so probably not a job.
Not really.
Okay. It's good to have them regardless of the size of your business. How do you know what to look for if you haven't described the role? Right? I mean, that just seems common sense, but a lot of companies, including large companies, don't necessarily have them. But I think that's foundational, in my opinion. Have that job description. If you don't have them, but you think, okay, all right, I guess I should start on this. I should really sketch out, even if it's just family, if it is family run and it's just for people to a larger organization. That's a starting point. If you Google job description templates, millions of them will pop up. And there's, you can autofill them and you can look at the one and pick one that, seems to fit your business, from the types of things that it's asking for. But what should be included in that job description? If I'm going to take the time to write one, if I don't have them, what should be in there? What are you going to put in there? What are you going to write? Skills. Skills, of course. What else?
What they actually do.
What they actually do. There should be some narrative in there that describes what the person does.
Are there any physical requirements needed for the job?
The physical requirements. Does anybody here have more than 15 employees? Okay, so you know about the ADA. And documenting physical, especially physical, environmental, and mental requirements. That's a good thing to put in, even if you only have a couple of employees.
It said the necessary skills needed.
Necessary skills, absolutely. There's an actual, what I would call a laundry list. So if you're not in HR, you can now impress your HR colleagues by it because you know what KSA means. Knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's just HR speak. Knowledge, skills, and abilities. Competencies. What are competencies? How are they different from skills necessarily?
We hand out competencies for every job position. I give them, they're outlined of everything that's required of each position so that the trainer who's training can go through to make sure, and they'll review it with them. Like if they're on grinding, for example, if they're going to be grinding, you have to grind so many times, you have to learn the machine this, you have to do this, everything that's in their competency, they have to go through each individual and multiple times within a 60 to 90-day period before it can come back.
So they're assessed on their skill.
Yes.
And meeting, it sounds like a standard.
Yes.
Okay, that's a best practice. Everybody heard what Tammy shared. So sometimes competency is more related to building a skill, but it can also be related to behavioral type things, characteristics that people demonstrate. If you think of a nurse, for example, does he or she demonstrate empathy, or patience for the patient, those kinds of things. So competencies just kind of often describe the behaviors that are successful: team orientation, project leadership. I mean, competencies, there's a zillions of them. But if they're part of the role, then you want to describe them. Obviously, you're looking at education and experience, depending on the role. What about values and culture fit? What do I mean? What do I mean there? Values and culture fit in a job description. in a small organization, these things might not be spelled out, might not have them in a beautiful poster on the wall, but there are values there, and there is a culture. Even if it's just a sole proprietor, a single person, there's a culture. And you want to, if you haven't already, you want to think about what that is. You know, that's also, you know, competitive advantage. A positive culture and good values are what will keep people. They feel identified with them. So think about that. If it's not reflected in your job description, include it. Physical requirements, Karen talked about those, and I also suggest if there's environmental factors as well, if it's not climate controlled, for example, the past few days we've had, people should know that. If there's certain mental requirements as well that are maybe unique to the job, you want to list those. And then we already said about, we talked about the ADA, and I'm sorry, I missed my typo there. That should say if your organization employs 15 or more employees, then you are under the ADA. So maybe some of you are not there yet, but you may get there. So how do we find them? How do we find these wonderful, talented people that will help grow our business, meet our customer needs, help us earn a profit? Where do we find them? So referrals, employee referrals. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed a company, a small cleaning company in Lancaster where I live, to clean my house. And that, you know, that's not the sexiest job on the planet, house cleaning. But they were offering some really exceptional services. And I said, where do you find employees? And he said, in referrals. I'm not going to refer my relative or my friend who's not going to do a good job, right? Because that's going to reflect on me. So employee referrals actually is a pretty common practice these days. Finding that other person who has a similar work ethic and values and so on that you need and is already doing a good job for you. Yeah.
And then if you use the employee referral, sometimes like we have a bonus like for the people. If that person stays long enough that in increments, you can get like a bonus for them.
You pay the referral bonus.
Yes.
And I'm more in favor of that kind of bonus than sign-on bonuses. I think people just misuse them. I don't know if you've had that experience. They work as long as they have to get the bonus and then they jump. Yep. You know, and everybody's offering them these days. Are you anybody using social media? Like LinkedIn, or someone told me Craigslist, and I was like, you can recruit on Craigslist? Sorry, I have a little bit of a bad impression about Craigslist. Although I've sold furniture on there quite successfully. I don't know if I'd want to recruit on Craigslist.
But years ago, I used Facebook as one of the tools.
Yeah.
And it manages the people who have applied to the back end.
I think I got rid of it.
Yeah.
Oh, did
Oh,
they?
did they stop?
I know, I just, I'm like, where did it all go?
I know, I thought it was like, I thought I imagined it.
Do you think they're like giving us notice?
Especially if it was working. I wonder what the story is there. Okay, so I need to take Facebook out of there.
Just replace it with Instagram. I mean,
So
and you
Instagram
might
has,
have to pay ads for it. I don't know, Facebook, but like their job just, you know, isn't there anymore.
I'm not real savvy when it comes to Facebook or Instagram. I confess I've never even looked at TikTok. I have grandkids for that. But it can work for some organizations. Just, you know, throwing out ideas here or trying to assess what you guys have found works. Has anybody used, oh, I'm sorry.
Geofencing?
Geofencing.
Yeah, it's a little controversial. Depends where you fence. That's like where you stand.
Where's my phone? I gotta look.
You know what it is.
Oh, you talking about the online geofencing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you pay to have, anytime somebody uses certain search words, you come up, but you give it a geographical area.
So what some employers do is they will geofence their direct competitors. We don't do that, but we might, where we think our, you know, if you look at your So we're construction, so we might geofence Home Depot. Or something like that, so that people going in there would get dragged. You have to be careful with it, because it gets a little controversial.
Well, is there, I suppose there's an ethical
Very.
discussion that could be had.
So in other words, if someone is Googling Home Depot for something, you might have an ad that comes up.
No, I think
It's
physically,
physical.
it's physical. They go into like
This
the
is GPS.
Lowe's and Lebanon,
Okay,
and their phone goes in there. Yes.
then you're gonna come up on their phone?
Correct, or like maybe there's an event and you geofence an event.
Oh. Oh,
You can also set the hours of the geofencing too, it's not
oh,
just.
is there a charge for that?
Okay.
There's a
Give me a minute.
Yes.
It's one of the more expensive things.
Mark, that sounds like it.
Guys, one of the great benefits of doing a session is how much I learned as the presenter, so thank you, Heidi. Anybody use, Career Link? Is that still an option? Unemployment office? That you can list, positions for free? We talked about employee referrals already, which tends to be the way to go for smaller businesses. So thinking about ads that ways that you might capture people's attention, I went out and searched creative employment ads. Now I'll suggest here that none of these ads are probably for you in your business, but the reason I want to share them is I love them. Yeah, each one piqued my interest. I wanted to read the ad, and I'm not qualified for any of these jobs except for one. But do you see the staircase? You have a construction or architectural type firm. It's just, again, people are getting hyper creative and trying to get the talent that's out there to take a look. Love the problem solvers wanted, call us on this number, but it's a mathematical equation, so I could not apply for that job. So clearly, I'm not the problem solver they are looking for. I would not be a good fit. This is not for you. Well, of course I had to read it. What do you mean it's not for me? But then I read it and I'm like, oh yeah, it really isn't. The school bus. I was a school bus driver for a short stint of unemployment in the early 80s. It was a really fun job. But I digress. As long as kids get the evenings and weekends off, so will you. You won't take your work home. In fact, that would be illegal. So you can make $16 an hour doing what those parents do for free. So I thought, there is a school bus shortage. There really is. And this is just a clever way. Again, somebody is thinking a little outside of the box in trying to get people to consider driving the school bus. And then I'm sorry, this will say something about me. Maybe I should reconsider, but can anybody decipher that? It's actually in English. I think I'll have one more before I go home. I think maybe you should be flagged. But it's a restaurant and bar down in Dallas looking for looks like a bartender. So again, it's a tough environment out there and people are trying all kinds of interesting things to get that maybe one or two special people to pay.
Did you see those online or did you see them posted somewhere?
I saw them online.
Okay. Just curious.
And I also
Billboards or.
no, I didn't see any of these local. I did a quick Google search. I also Googled ad employment. You guys have spare time? They're hilarious. And there's lots of them. I decided not to waste your time with that, but have that if you want. So what's worked for you? Heidi said employee referrals. Anything else specific that you're doing that is working well?
We have a peer that advertises hiring on billboards and they spell a word wrong. I can't remember which word on purpose. And they say it's unbelievable the attention that they get from it and how many calls they get. I can't bring myself do it. There's an idea for it.
Are they looking for like proofreaders?
No. I don't even think
That would drive me nuts.
Are they looking for proofreaders?
That's brilliant though, that would drive.
But are you getting
Yeah, that's
people
why I
like
said
trying to
to-
tell you that you have a mistake, or you getting people calling to apply?
I don't, they say it works for them, I don't know.
It's
Sometimes,
you know,
Right,
just
just getting people to
Yes,
notice the more. it
people
comes.
paying attention to your business. Yeah.
There's no way I can do it.
Today, Jerry took me on the grand tour of Lebanon City, and we went by it might have been the police station. And there was an actual police car with a banner hanging on it that said, "We're hiring." I'm like, now that's old school. You know, that's me back in my early days, or putting a magnet on the truck, you know, or a sign in the front yard. But that police car is all over town. And if they're looking for, you know, law enforcement people. So
Your vehicles are your billboards, so.
they
you gotta use
represent your company, yeah, yeah. So, an employment ad, if you're actually gonna do some kind of ad, what kind of things do you put in the ad? What's the ad?
Full-time, part-time?
Is it full-time or part-time?
If it's no experience, we always put no experience
No experience required or necessary or whatever.
or include a QR code. Takes you to your career
QR
page.
code, yeah. Does anybody have a career page? Where people can go? I didn't talk about that earlier, where you have the information there. Brief is good. I've seen employment ads, you know, that are, you know, a master's thesis. People are, how much time do people spend really reading?
Yeah.
Very little. So you wanna hit them, you know, wanna hit them quick and creatively. So maybe a little bit about the company, you know, a brief, you know, intro line about your company, or even, you know, I see some put mission statements in these days. Things that are important about the culture, we're family oriented, or we're a team inspired environment, things like that. And then of course, key experience that you want. Because your ad, of course, is that you want to attract the right people, you want to screen out the people who are not qualified. So
Sometimes it's
crafting,
important to put, I think, the salary in, because you're wasting a lot of time for people if you don't put the transparency that they want everything to go through. Because you're pulling people in, and then when they get there, they go through it.
They are afraid that they will kill them. So it's not better you say the truth and you die.
But you know one thing, if they put it in WT, they'll take it to the Supreme Court.
question from somebody online? They're all just off mute.
Yeah. She must have just knocked off mute. You're all muted now.
Thank you. Okay. But we will pause soon to allow the online people to join too. I hope everything is going okay, but please communicate with us if it's not. Salary. It
Like a
used to be
range, you can use
such
a range.
a range,
Yeah.
yes. And there used to be such a mystique around pay.
Yeah.
And you go, even as a professional person, I go in and think, you know, somebody say, well, what are you looking, you know, to make? Do I quote a range? Do I lock myself into, you know, a salary? What do I say? Some municipalities are now requiring employment ads, Philadelphia, for example, requiring them to post salary or salary range. And it probably, Tammy, do you find it cuts down on people who aren't?
I
willing
feel
to
like
work?
that where we started to do it, it stopped. It helped us not pull people in, because they'll get there and it'll save us time and them time, because
Sure.
they don't want to come in and go through the whole tour and do everything and interview and then be like, it's $15. I'm not staying for that. So we wasted all that time, phone calls, setting up, scheduling the leaders to take tours and do this and sit down. And if they had known the salary range before, they may not even have applied.
Yeah. So
I mean,
it's just a respectful thing all the way around.
Yeah.
If you can do it, and I see it Well, I see salary ranges for both, you know, hourly, non-exempt positions as well as professional positions. So it's becoming more transparent. And
Yeah, I think
that's a
Indeed
good
is
idea.
starting to do that as well.
I think Indeed forces it.
Yeah, I think so, because they did it for some of our ads and we didn't know at first, and then they said that it's,
They wanted.
If you
Yeah.
don't fill it in, they'll put like.
What's
most
close,
jobs,
yeah.
Right, they'll
Yeah.
like put the average in that.
on the
Right.
average.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, I'm always horrified when I see it that way, because I'm like, I bet people don't even know, because if you don't pull it in search.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't that also give you a level of protection against, you know, possible discrimination issue? If you're posting your salary range and it's all out there, and then whoever you hire, you can show you're paying within that range, no matter who they are, as long as they were qualified.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels honest to me, and all our candidates want that kind of honesty. It would be, yeah, it'd be difficult when you publish that to then do something discriminatory with that. Yeah, so I think that's a good thing, actually. I think if we're in the midst of mass recruiting and we can weed out people who aren't interested because of the salary, then we're moving on to those who are. And people can make an informed decision about working for you. Okay, the interview. Oh, did I talk about what can go in and out? Yeah, we've got it. Okay, the interview, here we are. What do you do to prepare for the actual interview? Before you actually, do you do face-to-face?
We start with a phone.
I was gonna ask about that phone screen. Okay, are other people here doing phone screens? What kind of things do you ask in a phone screen? Do you have a standard slate of questions? Or questions very aligned with the credentials the person has submitted? Phone screen is a great tool. Again, it's a time saver. You've got, you know, several candidates that you think you want to interview. Do the phone screen to be sure. Ask open-ended questions about key things on their credentials that line up with what you're looking for. If you're in a heavy physical environment and you know that the candidate is going to have to repetitively lift 50 pounds, what would you ask them in the phone screen? What question would you ask them? Do you know this is a biggie for your job, hypothetically? What question would you ask?
Can you lift 50 pounds?
And Jerry, I say to you, I sure can.
Okay, good.
Did I tell you the truth?
Probably not.
Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. So I would ask a behavioral-based question. I would say, what do you feel like you can safely lift repetitively in an hour? Let them tell me. If they say, well, you know, I had this back injury, and I could probably only lift about 20 pounds. You're like, okay, don't critique it, just make a note, move on to your phone screen, and then probably this person isn't a good fit for that role. Now that was a fairly, you know, simple example. You get into more complicated roles or higher level roles, then those phone screen questions become a little more complex. But try not to ask questions that can be answered yes or no. Why not? You're not getting real information. But if you ask an open-ended question, then they're going to talk to you. Hopefully, they're going to tell you stuff about them. You're going to decide whether this person is worthy of a face-to-face or a virtual interview. And if the phone screen doesn't go well, then they go to the bottom of the pile, right? You move on to your candidate. Yeah. Okay, what else do you do to prepare? So you do a phone screen, but there's other things that you want to do. Get ready for the interview.
I usually look at their you know, if it's through LinkedIn, I'll look at their LinkedIn profile, review their resume.
So that would be like first thing I probably want to do. Sometimes as a facilitator, I have a moment. I'm having one right now. Hang on with me. How'd that slide get in there? You want to review their credentials, their application, the resume. Probably have the job description if you have one sitting there too, you know, so you see that things are aligned. So you're looking at that. Maybe you're I'm old school gal, jotting notes in the, you know, in the margins of the resume, looking at the job description, pulling on what I know about the role, and putting together a slate of questions that I'm going to ask every candidate. Now, what I like a basic slate that I know is going to be used for every candidate. Now, that doesn't mean that you rigidly stay on the slate. The interview gets very organic and you're going to ask other questions. But I have that slate of questions because I have focused those questions on what I need, what I know will be a good fit. Does that make sense? Interview in a private place. Uninterrupted. Cell phone off. Laptop closed. If you cannot do those two things, postpone the interview. Please. Interviews, 30 minutes, an hour, maybe for a higher level job. Put the phone away, the laptop away. Give them your full attention. Small talk in an interview. There's only two safe topics. There's two. For small talk. No. That one's off the list. Just two.
The weather?
The weather. As far as I know, the weather is still safe to talk about. I might just talk about, it wasn't a great day yesterday. Weather was great. That was humans, you know. Weather is one. The other one is how was the drive in, if they're meeting with you, or how, you know, is the technology working? You know, something about the commute or how they got connected with you. That is it. No other small talk. Stay safe. Okay. Something I want to share with you. Anybody here a communication major, psychology major, you know, college or whatever? No. So this might be new information. I feel it's important to share this because the interview is a rather intense emotional experience for a lot of people. And there's a lot on the line when you're in an interview and you're trying to, you know, it's a complete stranger possibly, and you're trying to determine this, I don't really want this person in my business working for me or interacting with my customers, whatever. So I do this quick little communication primer. This gentleman by the name of 𝗬𝗢𝗪𝗖𝗎𝗓. I think it's important to share your stories. And I bet your printout gave you the answers to this. Should have hidden them, but that's okay. He was a UCLA professor in the 70s. And he talked about, we're talking face-to-face communication now. You know, we've got all these devices and we've got all these ways to connect. And do we still communicate really exceptionally well as human beings? You know, how many times have you walked down the hall and heard, man, nobody communicates anything around me? You've heard it. Yep. So he said communication face-to-face human beings has three elements. There's the words that we speak. Now, if you're looking at your handout, I just realized the answers are there. Yeah. See, I was just going to dazzle you with a little knowledge here, but now you have it. So words, interestingly, 6% of that model. The words we speak, 7%. Very small amount. But words are important, aren't they? Pretty impactful. Anybody have teenagers at home? Mandy, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you know about voice tone, right?
Yeah.
Not the words, but how it's said. Means an entirely different thing. So that's 38%. So we're not picking up cues from each other by the tone of voice. All right, again, this is face to face and somewhat on virtual because you have a little bit of interaction. Most of the communication process, folks, is unspoken. It's our body language. Now, why in an interview situation is this important to think about?
Shows you're engaged, you're interested in their answers.
It will show you're engaged and interested. So your posture when you're sitting in the chair is open, and you're, as an interviewer, you're conscious of that. If you're sitting there, I mean, you're telegraphing information to the candidate and they're picking up on it, whether they know how to read body language or not. You unconsciously harmonize body language with what we're feeling. So there's lots of body language going on. You know, for the past 45 minutes, I've been watching yours. You've been watching mine, etc. So be careful though, in our diverse workplace, Western culture body language has a certain set of sort of unspoken rules. Firm handshake, eye contact, very direct, you know, how our posture and so on. In other cultures, some of those things aren't quite as important. And we can misread body language if we're not culturally literate. So just be careful. If you're a book reader, I'll recommend a book called 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗜𝗖 by Vanessa Van Edwards. That woman dives deep into body language. I mean, I eventually put the book down. Like, holy cow, I'll never remember all this. She's not going to read that much on you. But you're in a somewhat emotional and stressful situation. Someone's seeking a job from you. You're making a decision about them. So you want to pay attention to these dynamics. Who does most of the talking in the interview? They should, right? That's right, Gloria, they should. Now you're proud of your business and what you have to offer. You love your customers and you want to tell them all about it. Tell them a little. They should have done their homework. In fact, one of the questions you should ask is, what do you know about our organization? But you're going to share a little bit, and you might even share a little bit about the job. But they should be doing the majority of the talking. I was in an interview once. I must have said maybe 5 words. And the recruiter called and asked me the next day what I thought about the interview. And he said, the folks there really liked you. And I said, what did they like about me? I didn't tell them anything. They went on and on. I mean, they were very proud of their business. I have to admire that. But they didn't know a thing about me. So
How, in that sort of environment, how do you sell yourself as a business? They have all these businesses they can work with, and that's your chance to tell them what sets your business apart from the other ones they might have interest in. So how do you balance that?
I think that's a great question. What I'd suggest, now it might not work for everybody, is that you conduct the interview first. And you might weave that in, you know, depending on some of their responses. And then if it's a strong candidate, of course, you want to share.
Can you repeat
That's
that?
just
What
my,
did she say? I'm sorry, I missed that. Go ahead.
well, Heidi asked, you want to share about your business, some really important key things about it, things you're proud of.
What makes you different?
What makes you unique and special? Why should they work for you, kind of thing. And I think it's important to share that, but I suggest that either you weave it into the interview or you save it for the end when you have a strong candidate. The reason I say this, again, take it or leave it, is if you give too much information, you get professional interviewees. They know how to interview. So you have fed them all this information and they're just going to respond to you with things that, if you're not really aware.
We do it after we've asked the questions, but I have different interviewers that divulge way too much information. It's hard to get them done.
Yeah. Pretty often. Yeah, don't give away too much. So, yeah, there's a balancing there that each organization would have to find out what fits for them. You're in the interview. What do you do with silence?
You like when you ask them a question and they don't answer it?
Mm-hmm.
I tell them they can't be silent.
I'm trying to figure you out. This is not the time to be silent. I said, this is the time for you to brag. I say, this is the time for you to brag. You brag to me about everything you would never brag to anybody about. I want to know everything you're good at. That's what I tell them.
Bonnie, I'd be like, here's my card, call me.
But the type of people we interview, they just assume that you know that they can do some of the things that we do, you know, they just assume that you got it all, that you know me. I'm like, you know, what kind of equipment can you drive? What can you do? You know, I just tell them, I need to know.
Does it work for you?
Yeah, I get them talking and then they start listing and I'm writing it down.
Okay, all right.
You have to give them permission to brag.
Yeah.
And that's,
You
you
have
have
to
to do the same thing,
encourage-
this is your chance to sell yourself to me, and
Yeah.
okay, it might feel inappropriate, but tell me what you're great at.
Yeah. But they don't know how to do it.
I think if you ask a difficult question and they are having problems come up with the answer, you wait.
Yes. How long do you
Yes.
wait? How long?
Until they start studying.
Well, I mean, I guess if it's an important question, you want them to come up with the answer, and I mean, unless it gets to the point where they're like, I don't know.
Well, and I have that, and sometimes I'm just like, I just accept it, okay.
Well, I mean, if that's their answer,
Yeah,
but
but
that's locating them,
Right,
right, right? But I think you can't jump in and save them. That's my opinion.
No, I'm in the same camp with you, Gloria. There is a certain amount of silence you should allow.
Yeah.
It puts a little pressure. Again, in Western culture, we don't like silence. We get all squirmy with it. We get right in their face and say, you better be telling me about yourself. I can check you out. It's just a level of silence that will inspire, use that word because it sounds so mean to just let somebody squirm in the chair. It's already a pressure situation. There's a certain amount of silence to let, I'm an introvert. My best answer isn't going to be, if you get in my face, Bonnie, the best answer is I'll have a day later. I can do that. So you give it a little time, but not too much. You don't make it really uncomfortable. If someone goes too long, you might say something like, we can come back to that question.
Yeah.
But don't do what I did once as an interviewee. I had a hardball thrown at me and I didn't have a ready answer. And I sat and thought for a moment, and then I said, could we come back to that question at the end of the interview? And guess what happened? She forgot. She forgot to ask me. She forgot. Don't forget. Cut them a little break. Say, we can come back to that question if you'd like, and you move on. And the pressure comes off.
Did you have the answer by the end? Were you ready for it?
I was ready for it, but she didn't ask me.
The introverts.
did you get the job?
Yes. So, understand, silence.
I think too, looking at their body language, their confidence during the interview, they're either like worried about their answers or they look very confident about what they say. And I think that makes a big world of difference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, isn't it wonderful to interview an authentic, honest, confident person? You just want to like grab them.
Yeah, but how do you know they're authentic?
Really? Perfect segue for me.
Okay.
Where I can ask really good questions.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
We'll talk a little bit, and you may already the behavioral based questions, but they take some skill if you haven't. They are open-ended. They cannot be answered with a yes or a no. Okay? They are about people's past experience, real experience, not hypothetical, where they have done things that they've shared on the resume or things that you need in your workplace.
And can you just, there's a question online, can you just confirm that the person who should speak most during the interview is?
The interviewee, the candidate.
The candidate.
Yes, thank you. So you're going to start the question. You might start, you'll have your own style here. Tell me about a time when, if you know that you deal with really tough customers all the time, you're going to tell me about a time when you dealt with a tough customer, what happened. If it's a team environment, Tell me about your experiences working on a team. You know, there's no magic to it. You just have to you have to form those questions so that they tell you a story.
It's funny because a lot of times when you go for interviews, those are all the same questions everybody asks. A lot of places you go. I'm just saying, like, you'll hear the same one, so if you interview enough, you're gonna get people that are gonna have the answers because they've heard it at this job, at this job, at this job. It's just funny, like, just from experience, because you go there and you're like, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then you have that all down pat, you got all that going, and then you go, well, what did you do when you ran into a tough situation and this, and how did you deal with pressure,
Yeah.
So.
Do you use them with your candidates, Tammy?
Well, I personally don't have to interview them because they go out into the foundry and the leaders that are in charge of that department, they will do it.
Okay.
I will actually just call to set the interviews up with them. I'll sit in on second interviews, but I'll also sit in on the higher up, like if we're gonna hire an environmental specialist or something of that nature, then I'll sit in on those and answer questions with them as well. But if it has to do with the foundry based, they're gonna interview with those.
So the hiring
or the operations manager or something of that nature.
So you make a good point, Tammy, that there's a lot of information. If I Google behavioral-based interview questions, a lot of those sites are for the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have this question tossed at you, here's a good answer.
Yep.
You know, so people can figure this out. So, you know, get good at this, you know, as far as your business is concerned, ask the questions that are directly aligned. So yeah, this is where the skill part comes in. How do I weed through an interviewee who's pretty seasoned and practiced at this and really get to the real person and what their experience is? So.
And sometimes you can tell by their demeanor if they're really truly interested, if they're not, or if they're just there for, I'm just here for this. I got it. Like, I don't know, unemployment, I just have to have an interview, or you can just tell by their demeanor, if they're just coming in, if they're serious, they really want the job, if they're committed. Like when we interviewed for our maintenance guy, I mean, he was unbelievable, and he just sat there and he did talk and he told us about his life and then all his experience and answered everything, and it was just a really good, you could tell he was motivated, he wanted the job, turned out to be exceptional, and he's been the best we've had.
But that interview took some time, didn't it?
Yeah, we had 2 interviews.
Yeah, so it took some time, but it was worth it.
Yes.
And you were able to assess that this person was authentic and genuine, and probably was a good fit for your organization.
But we also went through a recruiting system for them to weed through that to get us the better candidate. But even to get to the better candidate, you might go through that and they get there and they're still not right.
Oh, yeah.
But he turned out, he was exceptional. He is exceptional. So
it can be, it's a gamble. But you got to be good at this, really good at this. So hopefully this has at least sparked up some ideas. It sounds like some of you are already doing this kind of recruiting and asking these kinds of questions. You're also aware that people can prepare. They can do a Google search and be prepared, or they've heard the questions before, so they're just like running the tape, you know. So you got to watch for that.
You're not. Hang on, try it again.
Here.
Sometimes if I click on the screen to get rid of the chat window thing, you have to click back on.
Okay.
Click back on the screen.
Sometimes they just get temperamental. So if you're interested, I mean, there's a lot of information out there in behavioral-based questions. This was a site I went to, and these were more general, but you could look at these and probably tweak them to fit, you know, your organizational needs, or they could spark up other questions that you, yeah, that'd be a really great question to ask this candidate. So that's a website, but again, you can go out and search and find dozens upon dozens. I found it interesting to read the ones that were candidate focused, so that I got some canned response. I knew that they were on fire. That's not really who you are. Okay, I remember this is where I had to pause for, although we had the legal things to go through, I remembered. Karen, do we have any online questions?
No, I've been asking you them as they've come up in the chat, but if anybody's online and would like to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do so.
Like, we're good.
Questions?
I just had a quick comment. I had
Yeah.
a great interview when I was very young out of college, where they gave me scenarios to solve. Instead of saying, tell me when you X, Y, Z, they said, let's say, I was interviewing to be a teacher, and they said, let's say this happened. This child, you have an event, and this child stays behind it, whatever. How would you handle that? I think giving a scenario, because I can't really prepare for that. That's not something you're gonna find online, because if you can tailor it to your organization, say, hey, this happened, you're out, and this is happening, how are you gonna handle that? What would you do? Then I think that's something they have to, in the moment, solve, and I felt like that was a great interview when they interviewed me and asked me those things.
And I like it, it's a real life scenario,
Yeah,
it's something they could potentially versus hypothetical. Because
Right.
people can ace hypotheticals. Hypotheticals might be okay for a new entrant to the job market, but I like, say there's something tough that's actually happened in your workplace that this person's gonna have to deal with.
Right.
That's a great thing to
Because
do.
then they have to, in the moment, come up with
Yeah.
a solution.
Yeah, so, it's a great way to tap into how much experience do they really have or how much confidence in this thing, yeah. Great example.
I have an online question.
Yeah,
How do you prevent poaching from one's company? E.g., you hire an incredible assistant, and competitors near and far are contacting him or her through LinkedIn, trying to lure them in.
how much time do we have?
Wow.
That is a really, that's tough, that's going on all the time, I bet it's happening to you. You have some really star performers, and of course they catch the attention of other people. A lot of times there isn't a lot you can do, but I would want to know what, and you would want to know this in the interview, and as you onboard this person, what brought them to you? Why did they choose your organization? What attracted them to you? What are the motivational factors that are really important to this person? And if your organization has them, then I would say they may not go. Now, everybody's flashing more money, but let me tell you, money is not the only thing that motivates. In fact, money's low on the list. Well, we all need it. We never have enough. But if those motivational factors are present and that person really enjoys the workplace and working for you, they may not go. But if they've made a decision that they're on the fly, sadly, they're going to go. I mean, it's just sad that the environment is that way, but they are. So understanding what motivated them to come to you and work for you would be good to know. And then strategies to keep them.
I only started in April with our company, but I decided, being new to them with HR, and they've seen like different people, I sat down with each and every employee separately, didn't use their names, and just did a questionnaire to see how their morale was, where they were, what they liked about the job, what they didn't, where they thought there could be some improvements. Is there anything that we could work on in the management that would help them, that would, because we do have turnover like everyone else, but is there something out there that's causing that? And, just came up with a lot of good things, and then we just followed up with it. Now we follow up every other week. HR will follow up, and then the teams out, the leaders will follow up, and just so that they feel included, your workers feel included, and that they feel like they're important there too, because I think a lot of people feel like they're not. And if they feel that way, they may, and if somebody else is searching out there for them, even if it's more money or not, they may feel like maybe it's just time to go. Because some of them I talked to, they were incredibly unhappy, and I said, there's nothing worse than being unhappy at work.
That is so true.
There's nothing worse than that, because you'll take it home with you, and it'll just bring everything else in your life down.
So, Tammy's hit on a key thing. If the environment and the culture, the supervisor they work with, all those factors are good for them, regardless of the work that they're doing, and sometimes even somewhat disregarding, the pay, they tend to stay.
Yeah.
Those are hard things to find everywhere. And just paying a little more money isn't necessarily going to guarantee that you'll get those things.
Right.
So if they're important to you, you're probably going to stay.
Yeah.
So understanding those factors, that's a good thing that you did. Okay. All right. This is totally hokey, totally corny. But you know, when I put legal stuff up, people are like, oh my gosh, really? We have to do this? So in front of you, you should all have a red card and a green card. Okay, red and green. Red light, green light. Folks online, you can type into the chat red or green when I pop the quiz here, or you can just unmute and call it out if you're discreet. So I'm going to put some questions up here. Can you ask this in an interview?
No.
Okay, red light, green light.
It's on the application.
Shouldn't be, shouldn't be.
Well, they have to put their school.
But they don't have to put the year they graduated.
Not
The year they
It
graduated.
says the year range that they went to school.
Okay, that maybe you want to think about revising your application there.
Okay. Because of ageism.
Okay, it's kind of a yellow light. If you research legally on this, it's going to tell you, oh, sure, you can ask it, but are you making a decision based on this? It's code for age. When did most of us who went to high school in the United States graduate from high school? How old were we?
18.
We were 18. What about college? Maybe. I got my master's degree in 2008. Folks, you know I'm not 28, right? I just once would like to walk in and shock a recruiter.
Yeah, I was gonna say that worked really well for you.
Here I am, and no, I'm not. So it's code for age, avoid it. What can you ask?
Where they went to school, just here.
You can ask where they went and if they graduated. They're holding a degree or a diploma, if it's job relevant. Okay? Next question. Where were you born? Red light? Why?
I need to know a lot of things in my job, that's all.
Why on earth would you ask
They
this?
had nothing on that.
No, you're not gonna ask. This goes to national origin. That is a protected class. So there is really nothing you can ask around where someone was born. What professional groups do you belong to? Red light, green light? Yeah, you can ask that. You're hiring a project manager, you know, what professional or associations do they belong to? What networks, etc. Salespeople, nurses, teachers, etc. Be careful. There's a caution here. They might reveal something that is protected. Maybe something civic, maybe something political, religious, again, national origin or race. You want to be careful. Again, you can listen, but you want to move on. Again, and you're not making a decision on anything that's revealed there that isn't related to the job. Okay. Have you ever filed a workers' comp claim? Oh, you guys are on it. Okay, what can you ask?
I did actually have someone ask me that at a company.
I've
And they
been
had me
asking.
fill it out.
Have you ever been unemployed?
Yeah, like,
Or,
I was involved in a workers' comp claim.
Oh.
And what year and what?
Is that a,
okay, not really lawful.
I know.
Don't
Bizarre.
ask, don't you all ask it.
Mhm.
What can you ask though? When it comes to workers' comp?
Really familiar how it works.
Or did you ever time where you weren't employed?
I'd be careful there because you would be going into perhaps a protected leave, like family medical leave and an illness or a disability or things like that. Again, that can't influence, I mean, you know that they do, you can't strike it from the record, you heard it. But, you know, if you make an adverse decision and that knowledge has been shared, you may find yourself with a claim. Even if you didn't do anything really negative with that information. You could share physical, environmental, mental requirements of the job. And you can, this is where you can ask a yes or a no. Can you perform these functions with or without accommodation? That's okay, but steer away from periods of unemployment, workers' compensation.
If they have a gap in their resume, can you ask what they were doing during that time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do that.
Can you explain the gap in your employment? Okay. I was home taking care of my kids. I was in prison. I mean, yeah, all kinds of stuff. I was a house husband. Stuff, people do stuff besides work outside the, the home, and, I keep that conversation pretty tight, but it's legitimate to ask that, yes. Okay, what about this one? Okay, guys are good. What if the position that this person's applying for requires them to wear a headset, or requires heavy communication, hearing?
Front
desk?
They need an accommodation. We have that of that's part of our
Probably
hiring
more
process.
than 15 people, but yes, this job requires a lot of phone work, a lot of interacting with other people in conversation. Can you perform this job with or without accommodation? Hopefully they say yes. I'm good to go. Okay. What about this one?
I'm voting with green. I think you should be able to ask that, whether or not it's legal.
No.
Get a better way to ask it.
Thank you, Heidi. I agree. Technically, this is not an unlawful question, but again, just like with workers' comp, you could be towing into people's disabilities, medical history, things that are kind of off the table, especially in the interview. I like to ask people, tell me your definition of good attendance. And I just listen, don't critique, don't debate, just hear what they have to say. If they describe something that matches what you think your requirements are, super. If they describe something you're like, oh my gosh, this will never work.
How do you define reliable attendance? I like that. I'm
Yeah.
changing one of my questions. Say that again. How do you define reliable attendance? It's in the packet.
So how do you define reliable? It's another good way. Yeah, better question, better information, hopefully, that you can assess. Okay, just a few more.
Okay. Next president.
I detected an accent.
Yeah. No, I don't think.
Okay, yeah, not job relevant, really. Can go back to national origin protected class. Stay away from that.
I have a question. During onboarding, can we ask them if they're fluent in any other languages? This is once they're
Yes.
hired. Okay. I
Yes,
just added that to mine because we have bilingual speakers all the
Yeah.
time calling, and
Yes,
it's
that's-
nice to know.
that's
Okay.
legitimate job related question, yes. I have one more. Oh, I have two more. If you belong to a union. Everybody here union free? Don't, union membership is protected. It's a cherished right, whether you want our union or non-union.
Just look at the hat they're wearing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He was over stickers on that truck. That was a little stereotype.
It's very stereotypical.
I get that. Yeah,
So we wear the things we're proud of, so whether that's
Yeah.
a union or whatever.
that's true. Okay, this is obvious. Free on bone. Unless you're hiring a pastor, no.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a handout here if you would like it, that a law firm, which is referenced here, but it's in the public domain, so I took it legitimately. But it lists, a lot of protected classes, what you can and cannot ask. There's quite a, few areas that you can't ask anything. So that's here for you to take if you need further information. The last thing before we wrap up would be, are you doing reference checks? So, yes,
Kind of useless.
kind of useless. Why, Jamie?
Like if someone does a reference check with me, I'm really not telling them anything.
The only thing you do is really confirm employment.
Yeah.
Right, yes, they work there. Are they eligible for rehire? If I have a job with their very specific talents.
Okay, I'm gonna go to HR heck for this. Don't talk to HR. They're not gonna they're gonna give you name, rank, and serial number, because that's what we do. Because one of our jobs in an organization is to protect the company from risk. We don't want anybody coming back saying that we defamed someone or we prevented them from gainful employment in their future. Especially if we release them to industry in the first place. So, certain jobs should be reference checked. I say especially at the professional level. But you make a decision what makes sense for your company. So, you want the candidate that you're seeking to hire to provide you with the names of people who can speak to their performance. Former manager or supervisor, a colleague, maybe it's a professor in college who can speak a little bit to work ethic. That's a little bit of a stretch. But you want them to name the people you can contact. Hopefully those people will corroborate what they've shared in the interview. Be shocked if they didn't. But that would be good information. Never ever reveal to a candidate what was shared in the reference. Especially if it's negative and you choose not to hire. When they ask you, why didn't I get the job? You have a standard response. Does anybody know what that response is? You hired the person you felt was most qualified and the best fit for the job.
What if you didn't? What if there were no other applicants? So that's the easy answer, I agree. But like, so I interviewed somebody, but I don't have anybody else putting in interviews. How do I say to that person, I'm sorry, you're not fit? Your buddy ratted you out when I called you. No, I mean, we can't do that.
You want to revise your reference
I mean,
list.
we will just say something like, we've decided not to extend an offer at this time. Thank you for your time interview.
I think that's a good response. The less direct one is, we haven't concluded our search yet, but that doesn't let them off the hook.
Well,
So,
I don't want to string them along.
yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that's a terrible thing and I don't want to ghost them. So I feel like there is a point in time where we're not gonna hire you. But it's hard to know what to say.
Did you just say that we don't feel that your skill set is a fit for this job? Doesn't mean that you filled it.
Yeah, well, at this point, we're just saying we've decided not to extend an offer. Just trying to stay out of hot water.
Yeah, that's a good generic response. Have you found most people quietly go away, or do they push you for?
Very seldom does somebody come back and say exactly why didn't.
Yeah, I want to know more, and then
You
you
try to do generic.
put your foot down and say that's not information that you're willing and ready to share.
Are you doing that in writing or are you calling them?
In writing, actually.
We just
doing it
talked
right. Well,
about
that's
it. Maybe we should start doing that.
that's rare, but that's good. How many of you apply for jobs and never heard a thing?
Right, that's
I
why
went to the
they're
black
like,
hole of Indeed,
no, because I
whatever.
think for this position, we might have something again, so we wanna,
Right, and we don't, the hard thing is that's after we've interviewed somebody. So everybody that puts in an application gets an immediate response back that basically says, if we want to interview you, we will be a contact.
You'll hear
Because
back.
we don't contact everybody that puts in, because you get some that you're like, oh, obviously, that's not gonna work.
Yeah. I like, oh, Karen, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you were gonna finish up that comment. You like,
I do like, Heidi's generic language. We've decided not to extend an offer at this time. You may get, obviously, some people will say, well, why not? And you have to be prepared for that as well. That's not information, We really don't want to be getting into a situation of giving feedback. It can come back to haunt you, even if your heart's in the right place. So that, that's all I can say at this point. I wish you luck in your search, something kind. Yeah, that's a great question.
Do you have to respond though? if you said, we're not making an offer, can't you just end that with a period regardless of if they ask more questions?
Well, if they continue to say, well, Mandy, why not? I'd like to know, I'd like to have some feedback from you. I'd like to understand why I felt the interview went great and help me out here. I'm going to be interviewing with other companies. Why didn't I get an offer? And you're like, oh, now what do I say?
I mean, I would be comfortable not responding. That's not something that
To
bothers
just,
me.
to just say to them, I can't respond to that.
No, like just not respond.
You're just saying like an email
Yeah,
situation.
I mean, if I
Oh,
already given them.
email. Well,
I'm emailing everything.
They call, yeah, again, I'm old school. I'm thinking of candidates who used to call me and like, hammer me, I want to know why.
No, I always give that information in an email because I like it. I like to have a record of it.
But yes, you want the documentation.
Yeah.
So I have a comment and then we have 2 online questions.
Okay, to be mindful of time here.
Yes, so one of my comments is that I've been told by an employment attorney that you need to hold on to your resumes for quite a while after you have concluded all of your interviews, in case somebody comes back and says, you didn't hire me because I am older, whatever protected class that is, and you have to show that your other applicants had qualified resumes above and beyond what theirs were.
I'm trying to remember the statutes of limitations on filing, various types of discrimination. A year,
Yeah.
2 years is probably enough.
Right.
And that reminds me also of the notes that you write. Those are pristine. There is nothing in those notes that in any way hints to anything adverse or discriminatory. Oh, because those can be subpoenaed as well if somebody files some kind of claim. So keep your notes very job oriented and very clean as well.
So Michael Online has asked, what are the advantages and disadvantages of hiring virtually versus requiring in person? The pros and cons on one long interview, one round versus creating multiple rounds, which may raise the quality, like a filtration process, but add extra difficulty. So yes, interviewing virtually versus requiring in person.
If
Interviewing virtually.
Okay, so I'll take the first part, virtually versus in person. I always liked in person. You get a real feel for somebody, but if you're a larger company and you're recruiting from all over the world, obviously you're going to do virtual. You may miss some cues in a virtual interview. But on the other hand, you may miss an opportunity to get someone face to face because of the, just the way, we're post-COVID, just the way we live and people expect that. So, and certainly a first interview, virtual, but again, depending on the level in the company that you're hiring for, as you get higher up the ladder into your senior leadership, always in person.
So the second part of that was, is it better to do one long interview or multiple? And then he has one last question after that.
Okay. My preference is to do a couple interviews, maybe even more. Interviewing is exhausting. It takes time. It's emotionally draining. There's pressure and tension and stress. I like to see the candidate more than once. I like to circle back on things, and you get that in a second or multiple interviews that you might not a long one, and there's fatigue. There's just fatigue. You may not see the best of that person in a long interview.
And so the last thing, I'm not sure whether you can answer this quickly, but what are the good, bad, and ugly of DISC and other assessments, and when are they best to consider used, and when might they best to leave out of the interview process?
Okay, I love DISC, but there's cost involved in doing DISC, and you cannot make a hiring decision strictly on DISC. Do people know what DISC is? It's a personality communication assessment. It's lots of fun. Identifies your style and how you like to interact with other people and what's important to you motivationally, all of that. Wonderful tool. Good to assess whether a person will fit in your organization or with your leadership style, but you still got to do all the other due diligence the interviews or other skill assessments or background checks or reference checks or everything else. So you can't rely strictly on this. But I think that's a wonderful tool if you have the means to do it. But it's just one of many. That's my quick answer. What other questions or comments?
Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
You had mentioned not that national origin is a protected class, but I thought, and I realize these are not the same thing, but you are allowed to require your employees to be US citizens, right?
Or legally eligible to work in the United States. So citizenship or lawful visa, green card, all the documentation that people have when they come in to the United States. But that is asked after employment with the I-9. So that's not a question.
So that's the question that, like, when I post the job on Indeed or LinkedIn, which are the two that I use most often, that's a question that you can select, like, as one of their yes or no.
But it's, are you legally allowed to work in the US? It's not.
But you
Are
can
you a
also
US
ask,
citizen?
will you need something about visa in the future? You're left, that's one of the questions that is included.
We list that they have to be legally allowed to work in the US.
And there are companies that are doing that, well, requiring citizenship. Maybe not wanting to sponsor foreign visas and that sort of thing, maybe not having the means for the jobs to do it, and there's become a lot of legal entanglements with doing those kinds of things. But it's still legal to ask if the person is eligible to work in the United States. But that's
legal or illegal?
No, legal.
Okay.
It's, oh yeah, and a lot of applications still have that question on them, but it's not asking specifics about citizenship or where the person is from.
Okay.
You know, that may come later when you're documenting their status through the I-9.
Can I ask a second question?
Of course.
Are you allowed to require, because we require all of our employees need to have a valid United States driver's license, because every position that we fill requires people to be able to operate their own vehicle.
To drive.
As part of the job. Is
Yep.
that okay?
That's a legitimate, yeah, that's a job, legitimate job.
You have to ask like you were a bus driver, right?
Yeah, I hope.
So it's just.
I hope
So, I think, yeah.
Oh,
And if you're a
absolutely.
nurse, you have to show that you have certifications.
You have, yeah, the nursing license, yes, that's legitimate, absolutely, it's job required, you're checking their DMV reports, right?
But if they're not, if that isn't part of their job, the driving, then you don't, it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
You don't,
you would,
you wouldn't, and never
No.
ask.
You can ask if they have reliable
Right,
transportation.
right, but you would
Yes.
say, do you have a driver's license?
yeah,
Just reliable transportation.
reliable transportation.
Do you have any insight on how to provide a fair and equitable interview process for somebody who doesn't speak English as their first language? So like, how do I give somebody who may not have all the language skills to answer those great open-ended questions we came up with, and to give them a fair chance at a position that they don't have to have the
That they can perform it.
yeah, that they
Whether
can
they
perform it.
speak
Yes.
English or not.
So they might look at some of those questions that are complex, and they can't come up with the English words to give a good answer.
Yeah.
Yet they're still gonna make a great team member. Any,
If it's a common, if applicants are coming to you and it's common, I'd probably pay a translator to sit in. You know, it might be expensive, but,
yeah,
and I've done this, but I'd steer away from it, using somebody in the organization who is bilingual.
unless they're on your HR team. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly, otherwise, you know, I present with translators and, you know.
You don't know what's happening.
Exactly.
And no, giving
Saying.
Right.
well, the translator could be giving you
Yeah.
information.
Yes. It may not be, you'll never try it, so.
I've heard it's very inaccurate.
Yeah, I would probably look into the cost of that.
Okay,
All right, We're right on time.
Yeah.
I hope.
If you enjoyed this, we have part 2 coming, okay? It'll be on October the 11th. And Kathleen will be talking about business culture and how you define your culture within your company, and also retention strategies, okay? Now, this second part will be in Lancaster. So you may dial in and do this virtually if you'd like. If you're in Lancaster, it will be held at the Candy Factory. It will be in the afternoon, it'll be 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
So candy?
There'll be more than that. Because if it ends at 5:30, we probably will have a libation.
Where's the candy factory?
Candy Factory is on, North Queen,
Oh, so it's in
300 North Queen Street in Lancaster. Yeah. It's it used to be a candy factory, it's now a co-working space.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think, that was great information, Catherine.
Here. I put my contact info up here. Welcome questions. Feel free to email me if you have any questions that I can potentially answer beyond the session. Happy to talk to you. It was welcome.
Your thing you're doing in October, is that through SCORE direct? It's not through the chamber, correct?
That's correct. Just like Karen said earlier, all of these meetings that we've had with SBA and SBDC are open for everybody.
Can you just tell me, is there a basic template for job applications? You know, I picked up a tablet at Staples and I've been using this for like, I don't know how many years now, and it's like, I could use a basic template and then expand it on our, just Google it, or do you have anything that you would like?
If you send me an email, Bonnie, and remind me, I'll look for something for you.
Okay.
You know, something I think are really compliant.
Okay. I have an example of one from a company we found online. If I send that to you, can you?
Yeah, I'll take a look. I'd be happy to. Absolutely.
Does anybody have a great system with their job descriptions where they're housing them?
Housing job description.
Well, one verbatim, on like
OneDrive or something else?
yeah, like I probably have over 100 job descriptions. So like where I don't, and right now they're in an antiquated system called Access, which, yeah,
Don't use that.
So,
it's gonna die because it doesn't have any support, and someday I'm gonna come in and all my job descriptions are gonna have disappeared. So I'm looking for a system to put them when, oh wow. You know how?
I just provided like Word documents in our share. Server.
I just wanted a system that was smarter than me to help me.
You need to look into this from the payroll system.
Anyway, HR system.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking for miracles, what I'm looking for.
Well, thanks, everybody. It was so nice to spend the morning with you. I hope you took away a few helpful hints. And the best wishes in your hiring.